Good evening. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the Chair of the committee. Meetings of the committee are webcast, but seeing as there's no one in the public gallery, we don't need to make those announcements. Just to say, we're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way out of the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Runnymede Hall. And lastly, I assume everyone's phones are turned to silent. May I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in the row in front of me to introduce themselves, stating their name only, starting on my left.
Good evening, my name's Councillor Peter Gregg, Vice Chairman of this committee.
Good evening, my name's Councillor Jamie Huntman.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Grace Watson.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Carol Sage.
Good evening all, Councillor Rob Lillis.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening, Councillor Matt Cortez.
Good evening, Councillor Diana Jones.
Thank you, members. May I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again, starting on my left.
Good evening, my name is David Gittins, Principal Planning Officer.
Good evening, Stephen Garner, Assistant Director for Development Services.
Good evening, Sonia Worthington, Democratic Services Manager.
Good evening, Angela Law, Assistant Director for Legal Democratic Services.
And may I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Duncan Macpherson.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Sharon Ainsley.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence, Sonia?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Savage.
Item 2 is members' interests. Members, in the interest of openness and transparency, it should be noted that item 4 of the agenda relating to 45 Linden Way, Canvey Island, is an application made by the Council. This does not preclude you from taking part in the debate and voting on the matter as the Planning Committee for this authority. Item 3 is minutes. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee held on the 16th of July agreed?
Agreed.
Still with your pen. Item 4 is the site adjacent to 45 Linden Way, Canvey Island. Members, we have an application for the construction of 3 buildings. I'll now ask the Planning Officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll start off by saying that this application is being presented to the Development Management Committee this evening because under the Council's scheme of delegation, all council-owned applications on council-owned land need to be presented to the committee for consideration. The application site itself is located on the western side of Linden Way, located here. You've got some bungalows to the south, to the west, and also to the north. And on the other side of the road, you've also got some bungalows. The site is characterised by a number of semi-detached bungalows, but there is also, in a couple of locations, some terraces of bungalows as well. The site was originally occupied by a garage block, for those who are familiar with the site. However, these were demolished a couple of years ago in tandem with a development scheme that the council also undertook, located over on the other side of Linden Way over here. Those of you who were on the site visit on Friday will recall seeing those dwellings on the other side of the road, which have now been completed and are now occupied by council tenants. So, as this site currently, it's currently vacant. Unfortunately, this photo wasn't taken on such a nice day as our site visit on Friday. However, the site hasn't changed particularly much. The site is currently vacant. Originally, there was a garage block running down each side of the site with an area of hard standing in the middle. And all that is left now is it's been securely fenced off with a vehicular entrance and a gate across the front to secure the site. You can see from this side, these are the neighbours to the south of the site. You can see the bungalows here that front onto, I believe it's Almond Walk. And then you've got the neighbours to the north here, and you can see some of these have got front-facing dormers, which has partially influenced the style of the dwellings that are proposed this evening. You've also got the street scene looking up. You've got the entrance to the site is just here, and you've got the bungalows on the other side of the road. And then this is the site on the opposite side of the road, which the council completed about a year ago and is now occupied. Just to give some context, the proposal itself is for 3 one-bedroom properties, all to house people on the council's housing waiting list. You can see here that the site fronts onto Linden Way. The dwellings are set quite far back in order to provide parking spaces. Each of the dwellings has its own parking space, and there are 2 visitor spaces also proposed to the front of the site. Each of the properties has its own garden with its own external access. And if I move on to the next slide, you can see here the proposed internal layout. So you've got the layout of the site. You've got a toilet downstairs with a storage cupboard, and then you've got an open plan living, kitchen, dining room. And then on the first floor, you've got a bedroom with an ensuite bathroom. And you can see here on the roof, you've got small pitched roof dormers to the rear of the site, and then you've got a roof light to the front of the site along with photovoltaic solar panels. Here are the elevations of the properties. Properties are served to the front by ramps, so they can be accessed by wheelchairs and have level thresholds from the top of that ramp. And you see they're proposed to be finished in sort of buff brick, grey roof tile with the dark window frames. So the proposal before you this evening has been assessed against all the relevant policies, and subject to conditions, the proposal has been found to be acceptable. Just wanted to highlight that the original copy of the agenda, as was circulated, had stated that this was in the Winter Gardens ward. That was incorrect and is in Central Ward. However, I believe that has been corrected, but if some of you have an older copy of the agenda, it may say Winter Gardens ward on the front. I'd also highlight in Appendix 1, Condition 2 is now irrelevant, as instead of relying on a unilateral undertaking to make the RAMS contribution, the council's housing department has made an upfront contribution. So that upfront contribution has been made, which means that the legal agreement is no longer required. So Condition 2 is no longer necessary. So the proposal that's before you this evening has been assessed and is considered to be satisfactory and in accordance with the council's policies, and it is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1 to the report, but as I mentioned, with the exception of Condition 2, which is no longer necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Do members have any questions for the planning officer about this planning application? This is your opportunity to seek clarification on any matters. Please, can you refrain from making statements as they will be reserved for the debate section? Would anyone like to ask a question? Councillor Sage.
Good evening. What I am a little bit concerned about is that surrounding all these 3 properties are bungalows. Will any of the bungalows be overlooked by these 3 properties?
Let me just turn to... So if we look at the first floor plans for a start, there are no windows on the side elevations of the properties. So those properties to the north and the south, there won't be any direct overlooking from windows there. And then if I just turn to the site plan here, the only windows at first floor level are on, there's a roof light serving the bathroom at the front, so that would overlook the street scene where there wouldn't be any overlooking. And then at the rear, there is a window that overlooks the rear gardens of the properties. It meets the guidance within RDG5 by providing 9 metres to the rear boundary. So as far as the council's policy is concerned, there wouldn't be any undue overlooking or loss of amenity to any of the neighbouring properties.
Councillor Hartman.
Thank you, Chairman. With the parking arrangements, I know you've got visitor parking there. What's to stop residents from Linden Way using that as an overspill and using, taking up those spaces, or is it just assumed that that people residing in the new properties will only be the ones using them?
So it would be the general assumption that it would be visitors to the properties that would be using those visitors' spaces. If it turned into a problem, it would be a civil dispute between the landowner, which in this case happens to be the council, and those who are parking in that area. If it did end up becoming a problem, then it'd be something that the council could look into resolving sort of under civil matters.
Councillor Lillis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Steve, on paragraph 10.46, it states that it's recognised that parking is a sensitive issue. Might I ask if we can liaise with ECC to see whether there is any increase in local provision, like I think I mentioned at a previous application. So I'm thinking of a lay-by or something, just to help out with that issue. Thank you.
I can certainly have a chat with my colleagues at the Essex County Council. There are a number of lay-bys. Well, there is at least one lay-by on the opposite side of the road, sort of out the front of those the other council houses that have recently been developed. But it's certainly something I can contact Essex County Council about.
Members, are there any other questions? Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Last one. Steve, unless I missed it, I didn't see in the conditions, and I'm frantically looking now, the condition with regards to hours and days of work. I noticed I wasn't available for the site visit, but looking at the photo that you put up on the screen, clearly there are neighbouring properties quite close to the proposed site. So unless I have missed it, could I ask that the standard condition, i.e. 8 till 6, Monday to Friday, and 8 till 1, Saturday, with no work on Sundays or bank holidays, is added to the conditions? Thank you very much.
Yes, that isn't there, but it's more than reasonable for members to propose, as you have done, to add that condition, and we can certainly look to add a condition if that's what members wish to do.
Are there any other questions? The planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the planning conditions set out in Appendix 1. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Gregg, as Vice Chair, will you second the motion?
I will second the motion.
Please note that members should only speak twice during the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to speak first? Okay. Yeah, we need to, as an addition, I need to raise a motion proposing that the working hours be actually part of the proposal. Yes, so I'm going to propose that those working hours are included as a condition.
Yes, and is it right to agree the final wording of the condition? Get them to agree to the
Yep.
final wording with yourself.
Yeah, and if you would like to agree amongst us the final wording of that, that would be good. So shall we do that first before we vote? Would members be happy to do that in consultation with the officers?
Very much so. I believe it's a standard clause, pretty much, isn't it? So, thank you.
Shall we vote on that? Yep. Would someone like to second that condition? Thank you, Councillor Gregg. So we're voting now to attach the conditions of working hours. Yes. I'm going to propose that that is to be accepted. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. And in terms of the planning application itself, with the new condition added to it, I'm going to propose... Excluding condition 2. Yeah. And excluding condition 2. Thank you, Sonia. I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. The motion before you is for approval. Those in favour? And again, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. The motion is carried and the application is approved, subject to the planning conditions set out in Appendix 1 and the additional condition of working hours. Item 5 is John Burrows Recreation Ground, Rectory Road, Hadleigh. Members, we have an application to construct and install a table tennis table and a pétanque court. I now ask the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This application is being presented to the Development Management Committee because under the Council's scheme of delegation, all applications on council-owned land need to be presented for consideration. So just to highlight this, whilst the council owns the recreation ground, we are not the applicant. There is a separate applicant, which is the Hadleigh Community Group. But because we own the lands, that is why it is being presented here for consideration this evening. So for those of you who don't know, John Burrows Recreation Ground is located in Hadleigh. You've got New Road along to the south here, and Rectory Road running up to the east here, and you've got Dawes Heath Road running up here as well, and you've also got Scrub Lane running along here. It currently hosts a cricket club where you've got a couple of cricket fields, cricket clubhouse, tennis courts, a bowls club and outdoor play areas, and permission is sought by the Hadleigh Community Group for the installation of an outdoor table tennis table and a pétanque court. I believe it's a pétanque court, but anyway, so you've got the car park here, and you've got more car parking here, and this rectangle here is proposed to be where the pétanque court would be located, and this red outline here would be where the tennis table would be located, just to the south of the existing outdoor gym. I've superimposed these onto an aerial to try and make it a little bit clearer to understand. So you've got the outdoor play area here, bowls club, tennis court, and you've got the existing sort of cricket practice nets and things over here, and that would be where the pétanque would go, and this would be where the table tennis table would be. So you can see the location here. This would be located roughly where the table tennis table would be. It'd be one of these solid permanent structures, and then this is the location close to the car park where the pétanque court would be, and the pétanque court would be broadly a sort of a slightly raised platform with some sort of sandy substrate in it, which stops the balls from rolling. So the proposal before you has been assessed against all the relevant policies, and subject to the conditions before you in Appendix 1, the proposal has been found to be acceptable, and officers consider it, if approved, it would be a positive addition to the facilities on offer at the John Burrows Recreation Ground for residents. The proposal before you this evening is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1 to this report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Do members have any questions for Planning Officer? Councillor Hartman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I don't want to be impertinent, but is it necessary to get planning permission to have a table tennis table? I mean, is that...
So, unfortunately, yes. So in this instance, because of its degree of permanence, if you've got your normal collapsible foldable one potentially at home, that doesn't. But because of its degree of permanence, it's argued that this constitutes development, and also if it's on an area of hard standing, it's what's known as an engineering operation, and that counts as development, and development requires planning permission. So, yes.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Cortez.
Thank you, Chair. I take it there's a need for a table tennis court and a pétanque court in Hadleigh? People will use it?
So the Hadleigh Community Group, who have applied for this, certainly think there is. The way it's both are proposed to be used are that none of the equipment would be there. It would be bring your own equipment, but they would be open. They're not proposed to be fenced in, and they're open for residents to come along and play themselves. Whether there's a need for it, I guess if it gets approved, we'll see how well used it is.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Stephen, with the pétanque court, will that be surrounded by grass or hard standing?
So the pétanque court, which is located here, is proposed to just sit within the existing grassed area. It's not proposed to hard surface any of that, so it would still remain grass.
Are there any other questions? Members, the Planning Officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted, subject to planning conditions set out in Appendix 1. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Gregg, as Vice Chair, will you second the motion?
I will second the motion.
Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say that I think everyone knows I like a good news story, and I think this is. I'll be very much supporting the application, and I would like to publicly thank the Hadleigh Community Group for the good work that they do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is to approve the application. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. And the motion is carried unanimously, and the application is approved, subject to the planning conditions set out in Appendix 1. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members. That concludes the business for this evening. The meeting closed at 7:21. Thank you very much. Safe journey home.